Good afternoon. I'm Dena Ladd, the Executive Director for the Missouri Cures Education Foundation. Our mission is to protect and promote medical research in the state of Missouri. I am so excited that you're joining us today. We have people registered all over the state, all over the country, and outside of the country. So I'm going to ask a favor of you. If you feel comfortable, send us a selfie of yourself and let us know where you're viewing this from. We'll put an address in the chat box that you can send your photo to. Every year, we put on our website a recap of WISER. As you know, in the past, we've all been together at a conference, but this year we're virtual. And the good thing about that is we can connect with people all over the country. 7 years ago, we started WISER, the Women in Science, Entrepreneurship and Research Initiative. We now have that program all over the state of Missouri in 5 cities, hopefully 6 next year. We've also expanded our WISER presence because we have a Facebook group page and we have a new podcast, WISER Conversations. So this week is St. Louis WISER Week, and we'll be discussing professional development. If you missed yesterday, we had a great discussion on mentorship, and you can find that video on our website, missouricures.org, or you can go on our Facebook page. And then today we have a great panel discussing marketing your talents, and Thursday is negotiation and communication skills. But I definitely want to thank our sponsors. As you know, this has been a challenging year, and I'm very appreciative of those who have sponsored this event. Benson Hill, Pfizer, and Steinberg Family Foundation are our gold sponsors. Silver sponsors include Mid-America Transplant, the St. Louis Community College, Plant and Life Science, Pharma, SLU Research, Washington University in St. Louis. Bronze sponsors are Cortex, BDO, Commerce Bank, SM Wilson, and BioSTL. And our media sponsors this year is Fox 2, KPLR, and Town and Style. So thank you again for all of your support. Today, we have a fantastic group of women who will be discussing marketing your talents, and I'm going to ask them to join me now. And during our discussion, please feel free to submit questions in the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many of the questions at the end of the panel discussion. So let's get this discussion started. Let me introduce our panel. We have Charli Cooksey. She's the founder and CEO of WEPOWER. Melanie Bernds, Director of Communications, Benson Hill. Chanté Summers, Senior Associate Scientist at Pfizer. Jacqueline Hawkins-Salsbury, Director, Scientific Training of Physician Scientist at Washington University. And Stacy Taubman, Founder and CEO of RISE Collaborative Workspace. So ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. The first question I'm going to throw out there, I would like all of you to think about and answer. Personal branding is the process of marketing your strengths, assets, and value. This issue is important for women, especially when they work in male-dominated fields. So what are the strategies that each of you use to set yourself apart? And Stacy, I'm going to start with you. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, good old technology. Dena, thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be with these women and to be included in this incredible conference. You know, part of my philosophy and RISE philosophy is this idea of embracing soft and strong. You know, I think there's a lot of messages out there that you have to pick. And for me, I love to wear dresses. I love to be girly, but I also, I'm sitting at the front of the boardroom in meetings and I have that strong side to me as well. So I think it's about embracing both. And that's actually why our logo is purple and navy, this idea of, you don't have to choose. You can embrace both sides of you.
Wonderful. Charli.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. I would say the strategy that I most think about is pretty simple. It's authenticity. So speaking your truth, telling your story, and being unflinching and unapologetic about who you are and celebrating who you are, I think really allows you to set yourself apart because there is no one else besides you. And I think the more that folks are see you being comfortable and unflinching about who you are, the more that it challenges them and invites them to embrace what you have to offer as well.
That's great. Thank you. Melanie?
Thank you. I'm going to jump on Charlie's comment about being authentic. I try to use the strategy of 80-20 rule. So 20% of it is your authentic and consistent voice, but also the 80% of it is adding value to others and building those relationships. So your personal brand might be your me.inc, your own little business brand, but it's also how are you impacting others around you? And that's where that 80% is really strong.
Mm-hmm. And Chanté? We're going to jump to Jacqueline and we're going to come back to Chanté.
All right. I hope we get to hear what you have to say, Chanté. I really wanted to jump on what Charli and Melanie said as well. I think the key to thinking about promoting yourself and your personal brand and it is really figuring out what it is you're promoting and really doing some of that internal personal work to think about what are my strengths, where am I adding value, and really identifying that within yourself. And then once you've done that, as Charli said, being unflinching about this is what I'm bringing to the table.
I love it. That's great. Chanté? Do we have her yet?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yay.
Hi. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, so let me remember the question real quick. I guess personal branding and leveraging that and work in a male-dominated field. I think it was Charli who mentioned authenticity, and I think that applies really well for me when it comes to being really bold and authentic. And I think oftentimes I really just kind of speak with a conviction to things, mostly because I feel very passionate. So I think that is sort of my brand, and then just being true to myself consistently.
I love it. So all of you are talking about being true to yourself, being yourself, and that is absolutely, that's fantastic. So personal branding has some unique challenges for female professionals. Gender norms presume that women should be agreeable, warm, nurturing. And when they violate these norms, such as when they step up to make a tough decision or share a strong opinion or promote themselves, sometimes they're penalized for that behavior in a way that men wouldn't be. So how can you as a woman navigate this issue and develop a robust personal brand? Stacy, I'll start with you.
Yay. It's difficult, right? I have that personality at times that can do that. And advice that I have been given that's been really helpful is, I at first thought I had to change who I was. That was my mistake early on, is trying to be someone I wasn't. And when I got the advice is I don't have to change who I am. I just have to shepherd my impact. That's been really helpful for me, because when I'm in that intense mode and I, really want to start checking my boxes and I'm not thinking as much about my impact, people tell themselves the stories they want to tell themselves. So if I can preface it with, today I'm really focused, I want to really get through quite a bit of things today, just kind of shepherding that impact and prefacing it a little bit sometimes can help soften my intensity and my aggressive energy that can come through. So that's how I've navigated it.
That's great. Melanie.
Yeah, I think about it quite a bit from a business standpoint, that from my past lives and current life in branding and rebranding, companies tend to spend 25 to 10% of their revenue on brand reputation and management. So thinking about it from yourself, you kind of have to ditch those negative, toxic thoughts that sometimes are just in your own head and work amongst others and yourself of what objective am I trying to achieve with my personal brand. Knowing your strengths and your career direction is going to lead you into a path that you're not going to think so much about, am I being too boastful? Am I being too strong? Instead, you're going to start thinking about, am I communicating to the right audience? Am I hitting the right target influencers? Some brand exercises that go on in companies is the formula of visibility, being authentic, and then you times that against consistency and the ability then to reach your target audience, maybe reach a future boss, a colleague, someone that you can be a thought leader with. So I say ditch the thoughts and look internally how you can really build your own brand.
Yeah. And Chanté?
I'm sorry, Dena, I'm having a lot of audio issues. Can you repeat the question for me?
Of course. So we're talking about how personal branding can sometimes be a unique challenge to female professionals because people expect us to be warm and nurturing. But when we step up to make those tough decisions, sometimes we're penalized for it. So how can you as a woman navigate this issue and develop a robust personal brand?
Yeah, I think that feeds back into, for me personally, networking within the workplace and creating those allies so that it doesn't feel like it's just your voice, and that you can, maybe bounce ideas off another colleague, and then they can kind of come to you or the other person and say, I think Chanté said this and she had a really great point. It feels less isolating. And then, just the more people that you have, I think is really, really helpful in that situation.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to remind everyone that we're going to do some Q&A at the end of the discussion. So please put your questions in the chat box. And okay, so I think we took care of that. I know that some people who joined late also wanted to know who is on the panel. So I'm going to again say Charli Cooksey from WEPOWER. She's the founder, Stacy Taubman, founder of Rise Collaborative Workspace, Jacqueline Hawkins-Salsbury from Washington University, Chanté Summers from Pfizer, and then Melanie Bernds from Benson Hill. So this is our great panel today. Okay. So sometimes women feel uncomfortable talking about their accomplishments and really promoting themselves directly. But there are other ways to show your areas of expertise when building a brand. So can you share with us ways you promote your areas of expertise when it is challenged? Jackie?
Get myself unmuted. I was thinking about this as everyone was answering this last question too. Sometimes I have found at times it's important to call things out and sort of point things out when they're happening. So I can think of several times where I've said something to the effect of, if I were a man in this position, I would be expected to fill in the blank, some action. And I say, so I'm going to do that thing because that's the expected thing here, right? There's no reason I shouldn't do that just because I'm female. And I found that helps sort of reframe some expectations in those types of scenarios. But when it comes to sort of self-promotion and comfortably talking about your own skills, for me, it's been important to go ahead and acknowledge that that's going to feel uncomfortable. It does feel uncomfortable. There's nothing, special or magical about me that I'm really different and don't feel uncomfortable in those situations. I do. I think a lot of people do. But I think it's important to see that in ourselves, in myself, and then say, all right, I'm going to do it anyway. It doesn't feel good. It feels really uncomfortable now, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take all of the softener words out of my email. And I reread every single email I send and make sure I've taken all of those things out. And, when I'm in a job interview or some of those sort of higher stress scenarios, that I'm really watching myself and being sure to push a little bit further past what's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. Stacy?
Yeah, absolutely. Many people don't realize this, but I'm actually a secret introvert. And so when I started, and I hated public speaking when I was a teacher, I would make my students go do it because I hated to do it. So obviously I've had to get over that. At the end of the day, what I've found is that people want to support you. People want to be a part of your ride. People want to see behind the curtain. And so for me, I try to frame it more from that standpoint of sharing my journey. If I think about it more as like trying to inspire the young women that I've met through the years and less about me, look at me, that sort of helped me to give me courage to continue to share this and balancing it, right? Like if I'm going to share the fabulous things that have happened to us, sharing the hard times too. And this idea that it's not rainbows and butterflies every day. I have days where I fall on my face and make massive mistakes too. So I think being willing to do both helps me to get courage to get out there and share the wins along the right way.
Yeah. I think as women, that's something that we do. We'll talk about our failures, but we'll also talk about our successes. And I think other women appreciate that and can relate. So that's fantastic.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's because it makes it more approachable. If all we share is how fabulous we are, then when the other person along the way is struggling, then it's like, well, I'm just not as good as her because I'm having a hard time. And the reality is everybody has hard times. And so the more we embrace and talk about those, I think it gives other people courage to get out there and go for their big dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to turn to networking now. It is networking that connects us all. It is networking that expands our worldview, creates opportunities. We know that networks are critical to career success, but many people still find it challenging to network. So what advice do you have for women who are trying to build their network? And I'm going to get this to Charli, who's the queen of networking, by the way.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it today. I would say it really starts with the internal work. So getting clear about your vision, your values, your what your desired trajectory is professionally and personally. And once you're clear about that, that really helps you prioritize what spaces should I be in, who should I be building relationships with, what spaces do I need to deprioritize, and then really just leaning in. Once you're clear on that vision and your values and where you're headed, then you can think about who is it that I want to build deep relationships with, and what is it that we can accomplish together, and how can I not only sort of benefit from that relationship, but how can I support that person along their journey as well. So I think it starts with the internal, and then once you're clear on the internal, then it starts with the external, the relationship building and the leaning into spaces and places that support those goals of yours.
Yeah, great advice. Melanie.
Yeah, I think a large component is great storytelling, whether it's about yourself, it's about your day, what projects you're working on, your team. If you have a great story, you can really build upon that and think about some of those objectives that I mentioned earlier about your career path. And even in your early career, I think networking can be really overwhelming for a lot. That's nothing new. Dena's a star at it, as many know. But think about what is the point of you going to this event or attending a virtual conference, because our time is really important right now, and thinking where can you follow up from that event? Doing your homework beforehand. You can find out the attendee lists, the sponsorships. How does this align with your objective? And from those little notes that you take, you can go into the event more focused rather than it being overwhelming. And God forbid, you can Google someone ahead of time and know what they look like, maybe what they've recently tweeted about. Maybe you guys go to the same coffee shop, so you can say, hey, would you like to grab coffee here at some point after you've met up with them at the conference? So I would say maximize your networking time so that it's beneficial to you and to the person that you're trying to meet up with. And then follow up either with a note or maybe engage with them on LinkedIn. There's more than 700 million users on LinkedIn. That's a huge audience. So why don't you also use that as part of your networking space as well? So storytelling, and also just simply asking questions of others and learning about them. Charli mentioned that external. The more that you learn from someone else, you can see how you can be collaborative together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie.
I am not a networking queen. So I'm one of those people where, looking at that list of all the attendees, it's something has often felt very overwhelming. But something that has helped for me is to not stop calling it networking and to think of it more as just, I'm going to go and I'm going to meet people. I'm going to meet my colleagues. We're going to talk about stuff that sounds great. And it's so important to have a goal and to really to think about who you want to meet and where you're going. But if that feels too overwhelming, maybe leaving that for now and just going to meet people and talk, because I know how to do that. I bet all of you guys know how to do that too. And that for me took some of the stress off.
Yeah, that's great. Just by saying, yeah, you're going to connect with people, not necessarily networking with like, I have to meet 5 people today or something. That's a great way to put it. Definitely. So Stacy, what are your thoughts about promoting your work and accomplishments through social media? Because I know with Rise, I mean, you all do an excellent job of really promoting the organization through your social media. And now I know you have a second company, and I know all about that because, again, through your social media. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, going from being a high school math teacher to opening Rise Collaborative was no easy feat, you know, and meeting incredible women like yourself and various other women was game changing for me. I interviewed over 300 women in my first year, and I met all these amazing women. And I'm going to sidebar for a minute, going back to your other question. It wasn't about networking. It was about building these relationships and learning from these incredible women. And when I viewed it like that, I was much more willing to do that. And all of these women, you know, they became invested in my story and our journey, and they just really wanted to stay up, you know, on what we're doing. And everyone's really busy. And so, you know, going to what Melanie was saying, I look at it as more storytelling and more sharing behind the curtain and letting people come along for the ride, because it's a wild ride and kind of entertaining at times. And so if you view it that way, I think it just takes some of the pressure off of, hey, look at me and look at what we're doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Melanie?
I see social media as an opportunity. There's multiple recruiters, especially on LinkedIn. I think the numbers now are like 92% are looking for high quality candidates. So it's no longer your resume or who you know, but also how authentic is your voice and your expertise. And I call it your digital footprint. And that's something that a lot of companies are interested in if your values align with them. And also deciding what platform is best for you. You don't have to do them all if that's overwhelming. And I spoke earlier, a lot of us are busy, and opening our phone to send out a tweet or like something on Instagram can be overwhelming. I've recommended to leaders before who are diving into social media to plant it on your calendar, put a hold on your calendar, start lifting some content that you think is interesting or what you're reading, and then share it with the world. It's not being boastful. It's also helping build that community of expertise. And think of it as the USP, your unique selling proposition. So social media can help amplify your voice. And why not use it when there's such a large audience? But it's also really beneficial to yourself, to who you can meet with and who you can engage and learn from. But as long as you're adding value to others, I think social media can be very helpful rather than overwhelming.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes putting information out there can also help others or assist others or inform others. And so I love your suggestion of setting aside time to do your social media, because I'm one of those people at 6 a.m. I'm like, okay, I better post something on my LinkedIn now, you know, but setting aside that time makes a lot more sense and you're not as rushed or stressed. We're getting some great questions in the chat box. So again, I'll remind everyone, if you have a question, we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end of the discussion. And also, if you're comfortable, please take a selfie and send it to the email that Ellie Hayes put in the chat box. We are virtual this year, so we don't have conference photos, but would love to know where you're joining us from. So we should all take time to invest in ourselves, and in this fast moving world of content, information gets out of date rapidly. So we should all keep learning. Are there books or programs that you have participated in that you found beneficial to your personal growth, like a Myers-Briggs, a Strength Builders? Charli, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. I would say all of it. I am a constant learner. I love learning from people. I love learning from books. I love learning from training. So StrengthsFinder has definitely been a transformative tool of mine. And I really appreciate that tool because it really sets me and others up to think about our strengths versus our deficits, and for me to celebrate what my strengths are and lean into those versus thinking about how do I improve this when that may not be my default or my sort of natural gift. So that has really helped me think about when I encounter a challenge, how do I leverage my strengths to get better or solve this problem? I would say another sort of resource goes back to people. So thinking about where am I in my professional journey and who are the experts and who has mastered this part of the journey and how can I learn from them? So whenever I have a challenge, I know I have someone on speed dial to help me navigate my HR issues. I need to have someone on speed dial to help me navigate fundraising. So really having a circle of advisors who I can call on, and they share tools with me that they think might be beneficial for me along my journey.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Chanté.
Yeah, this question, was very interesting for me because I think for me personally, it sort of begs the question of, in a fast-moving world, do we really need to be going so fast? I work at Pfizer, and it's like everything needs to be done yesterday, and we're all asked to take on more and more and more. And so for me, where I am currently, it's really just investing into myself and creating a lifestyle that's sustainable so that I can continue to feed into the work, the volunteer, the people around me. And so I've taken leadership classes at Focus St. Louis that I really loved. I've taken, professional development, like strength finders from like Gallup and stuff. And those are all great. But I think if you're in a position where you feel really exhausted, then you should maybe check in with your body battery and instead invest in yourself and, reading fictional books that are fun, and really just tapping into that part of your brain that needs that rest for yourself. And I think that overall creates a path forward for personal growth that can then feed back into your work.
That's great. Jackie?
Absolutely. I'm with Chanté. I read a lot of fiction, sometimes really bad fiction, and it's great. So I think it's really important to recognize yourself as a whole person and feed those other parts of you, because that lets you show up in all of the parts of your life better. So I haven't done a whole lot of, I have a lot of books on my shelf that I've gotten like 30 pages into and not really stayed with. But what I have found as I've gotten a little further in, and I guess I would encourage anybody else to, is really think about the formats that work for you. I'm not going to read a book. I now accept that. I am not going to read one, like a personal development kind of book. I will, however, listen to a podcast. I love that. And I can get a lot that way. I'm even more likely to listen to an audiobook, so recognizing that format I'm much more likely to engage with. Or if you're the kind of person who's going to be a lot better going to some sort of in-person event where you can really interact with people, I think that's helpful.
Stacy and Melanie, do you have anything to add?
Yes. Well, I have a master's in counseling, so I love all things interpersonal. Myers-Briggs is a great one. I know, Charli, you already mentioned Strength Finders. Some people are asking their Strength Finders is a personality test. Two that have become more popular for me, Enneagram. Enneagram is another personality test. It has to do with numbers and where are you versus where do you go in stress. And that's been really helpful for me. And then an even newer one, Emergenetics. If you've never heard of it, Emergenetics is a great personality test that really helped me and my team kind of figure out how we all work together. And then I'm, different from you, Jacqueline. I am a nerdy book reader. So give me a book, fiction or nonfiction, I'm a happy camper. And the two I'm reading right now I'm reading like 6 at one time and only, getting through a little bit at a time. The 2 books that have been really changing my thinking and helping me a ton lately is a book called Influence. I don't know the author of that one, so I apologize, but Influence is a great book, especially when thinking about your personal brand and how do you influence the people around you. And then Never Split the Difference. That's by Chris Voss. He was an FBI terrorist negotiator and took his learnings and have translated it to business, and how, you know, even if you don't think you're negotiating, in everything you do in life, it's a negotiation, and thinking about how to set yourself up for success. So those are the things that have been helping me lately.
I don't know if you can see, I'm taking notes on all of
Yep.
everything you guys have been saying. And by the way, tomorrow is our communication negotiation panel, which is, it's going to be great. So Melanie, anything to add?
Yeah, when thinking about personal brand, I agree. A lot of the podcasts are really engaging right now because it's storytelling, and it's building upon of how an individual got there, or coming through the other end. I really enjoy my podcast. And at Benson Hill, quite a few of us are reading the Oz Principle, and that is very reflective in how to work with your teams, and also all of us being around the same framework and building together. So it's really helpful also when you and your colleagues are reading a similar book as well. And you can sometimes tell who's on what chapter. But for myself personally, on this road of personal brand and elevating yourself, I just received the book 9 to Thrive. It's a very simple book, but it talks about your personal brand and not like over bragging oneself, and cultivating a strong community, and looking at your career path and how to get there with a digital footprint. And I find that very interesting because social media is kind of like driving a car. Everyone has a license and can use it, but not necessarily everyone should be behind the wheel. And so with social media, I think they give a good insight of finding what platform aligns with your goals and how you can best use it.
Yeah, that's great. And I know a lot of people are asking some of the books you recommended or podcasts. So if you have a minute to put those in the chat, I know that the participants would love that. So before we get to the Q&A, the final question. So COVID has really changed our world personally and professionally. And how are each of you coping? And what advice do you have for other women to get through this pandemic? Chanté, I'll start with you.
Hi. Yeah. So pandemic. I think as we move into colder weather, and we should all be taking very seriously the astronomical cases that are happening, is really just considering, you know, setting yourself up for a winter that is going to be a challenge for all of us, and how to build those connections and keep them. So I am in a space at Pfizer to work a lot. And sometimes that can feel lonely if I'm just in my house alone. So actually every Tuesday I get on the phone with a friend in DC, and we both just kind of sit in silence and work together. And it feels like you're working next to somebody, and it's really, really nice. So it's something that I can look forward to, you know, every Tuesday, and that schedule also really, really helps me. I personally really like to use exercise and movement as a way to recharge and build myself. So I know that yoga can feel sometimes intimidating, but even if it's just a 10-minute chair yoga, you know, a couple times a week is really, really good for you. And I'm honestly looking forward to doing like virtual holiday stuff, of like having happy hours and maybe wearing your ugly Christmas sweater and showing off your decorations. So that's those types of crafts things that I can make homemade gifts and send to friends is I think helping me kind of just, you know, keep a positive outlook.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned the ugly Christmas sweaters today in my email. I got something about ugly Christmas masks. They were adorable. So let's see, Charli, what about you?
Yeah, I think Chanté covered it all. Really just leaning into and leveraging this moment as a way to practice self-care. Exploring what are the traumas we've been having to wrestle with all of these years, and having the opportunity to unpack those and to engage in whatever can help us shed some of those traumas, so that whenever we return to working in person or being in greater proximity, we're able to be our best self, and not be clinging to or burdened by all of the things that we didn't get the opportunity to sort of sit with and process and get rid of when we were in the normal air quote. So for me, very similar to Chanté, reading, meditation, pre today, as many walks and opportunities to be in the sunlight as possible. And also making that a practice among my team. So we have half days on Fridays that are sabbaticals, and also getting my chakras aligned and unblocked and all of those things. So really, I've just been using this time to practice self-care in ways that I never had the opportunity to do, but also recognizing my privilege and knowing that not everyone gets the opportunity to sit and do the things that I'm doing and work from home and still be able to have certain luxuries. So while I'm able to do this, I'm also acknowledging my privilege and thinking about ways I can be in solidarity with folks who are impacted by racism, classism, and also the idea that they might be an essential worker. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Charli. Jackie?
Yeah, man, pandemic. I guess I think the most important thing to get through this is to, for me, has been to show myself a lot of grace and recognize that this is really, really hard. I had read something, I don't remember where at this point, about how a lot, we're willing to, we look at other people, we look at our colleagues and we say, oh yeah, this is really hard. Of course, it's very understandable you're not as productive right now. Like we can see that in other people. But then when we go and to look at ourselves, we're like, yeah, but not me. But this doesn't apply to me. I can do it. I can continue to do it all under all of this stress. And I can't. I have small kids at home. I'm incredibly privileged and lucky to be able to do my job from home and be safe, and for my family to be safe and well. But that's also hard, that adds in its own levels of challenge. And so all of the things that Chanté and Charli just said about caring for ourselves and getting outside in the sun and getting exercise and taking care of ourselves in multiple ways are really important. And the thing I would add is to show myself, to show ourselves and each other an enormous amount of grace.
Definitely. Great. Yes, thank you. Melanie?
Yeah, I'll build upon that. I really like how you said grace. I've been listening to a couple podcasts talking about self-compassion, and that's not something you're necessarily taught in undergrad, right? And I am someone who is a planner and loves to have a routine, and COVID kind of threw that upside down. I've been calling it the upside down world that I've been living in. And I've had to rebuild and modify my routine, and also being nimble and tell myself that that's okay, and have some self-compassion for myself too when I trip up. And with working from home, one of the best recommendations I had from a friend who had been working from home like 6 months ahead of me, she said, when something weird happens or something exciting or bizarre, phone a friend, call a colleague, because you would have done that at the water cooler. You would have popped into someone's office and be like, guess what just happened? Or we just landed this. Those moments of calling an individual, whether it's a colleague or a friend, they probably have very similar stories to share. And it's nice to pick up the phone and still hear friends and think about some of those successes and share those, because I find that other people's successes really motivates myself and inspires me as well.
Yeah, that's great. Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys nailed it. I mean, the one I was thinking about, which Melanie, you reiterated, is this idea of compassion to myself. I am, as many of you guys are, high achieving, success driven, and the things that used to work just aren't working as well. And embracing that we're not as successful as we used to be, and that's okay. That's been really difficult during these months, and knowing that there's a lot of uncertainty and that our business may or may not survive this, and getting to a little bit of a place of zen about it, which is easier said than done. But for me, sometimes facing the worst, facing the very worst in terms of my business, professional life, is that my business could close. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? Do I want that? No. And are we doing everything in our power to make that not happen? Absolutely. But some things might be out of our control. So facing it, embracing it, and just giving myself grace and space, and trying my best with self-care. Thank you for both of you, Charli and Chanté, for mentioning that again. I definitely need to hear that over and over. And human connection. I am so lucky to be the founder and CEO of Rise Collaborative because our community of women are some of the most supportive and wonderful, inspiring women I could ever ask to be surrounded by, and reaching out and having that human connection in my times of struggle. I'll tell you what, our business would not still be alive and around if it wasn't for our members picking me off the floor and saying, keep fighting, keep fighting. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, so I really appreciate all of you opening up and giving us your personal advice and sharing with what you're doing right now. And I think it's okay to have good and bad days. You can kind of tell in the morning, it's like, I think this is going to be a bad day. So how am I going to get through this day? Or this is going to be a great day, So thank you. So now we're going to jump over to the questions. We've got some great ones. And the first one, I hope you don't mind, Chanté, I'm going to direct to you because it is about a young woman, as a young woman in science that recently started their career. What is one thing of advice you would give that would hold me and many others throughout the years?
Yeah, that's one thing for the rest of your life. That's a great question. I would, something that I have been wrestling with is that, it's just something that I personally have been thinking of a lot, is that when I started out as a woman in career, I focused a lot about the hardships that I had to overcome. And I had to overcome a lot to get to the success that I'm currently at. And so sometimes I still flinch with those things. So there are meetings that sometimes feel very overwhelming, that I'm the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room, where I've begun to see that I don't really need my guards up as much anymore, and that I'm leaning more into like advocacy or mentorship from white men that I think, a couple years ago, I would kind of like give the side eye and be like, what can I learn from them? They don't know anything about my experience. But that not only robs me of information that they can give me, but also of maybe breaking some of the stereotypes that they might hold against a woman of color. And I think that, I guess, like, to summarize, is like, don't necessarily, sideline a potential mentor or sponsor or advocate simply because of your own biases that you might have. And so just regularly check those. I think it is helpful to continue to move forward in your career path.
Yeah, it's great advice. That's fantastic. Another question, and we have quite a few questions kind of in this realm. They're talking about, as we talked about before, women being warm and nurturing and having that type of personality. Is it harder to get paid for what you're worth? And how can you be nurturing but command respect as well? Who would like to take that question?
Here, I'll start it. And then I think Stacy has something.
I'll jump in after you. Oh, you go.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I think Chanté, you even wrote a little bit about this in the chat. You can be both. And we have to start being both and start demanding that being both is totally okay. And, so somebody asked about, how do you then command respect and get paid what you're worth? And so I think that's where boundaries come in. So those are the conversations where I do sit there and I say, if I were a man in this position, I would be asking you for more money. And I know that this is what similar positions are paid. Therefore, this is what I'm asking for. It's not comfortable to say those things, but that boundary kind of has to get put in place. And similarly for sort of the issue of respect, I think also, having some boundaries around, yes, if this is your natural personality, yes, I am nurturing and warm and, friendly and whatnot, but that there's going to be a limit to that. And when you're treated unfairly or inappropriately, you're not just going to accept that. And I think it's important to kind of have those boundaries for yourself about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate the question because I do think there's a misnomer that soft or nurturing in a business world is bad. I actually think that can be a superpower. You know, I think where people go wrong is when they try to be someone they're not. If you are naturally a warm, nurturing person, leaning into that, I think is really important. But to your point, with boundaries, being warm doesn't mean getting walked all over. Being warm doesn't mean not asking for what you need and want. You know, you can be nurturing and do all those things, but you need to do it in a way that feels aligned with you. And so it's about not sacrificing your needs, not changing who you are, if that makes any sense. And I think that warmth is always, you know, it's about, at the end of the day, I don't care what business you're in, what profession, it's about human connection. And how can I connect with a lot of different people? And the way you connect is being authentically you. That's the magnet. So lean into who you are, soft or strong or both. How about it?
All right. Anyone else? And I think that's what you hit on, a couple of you hit on earlier, is to be yourself, be authentic. And I think when we try to be someone we're not, it really comes through, and sometimes it's not so pretty. So it's this is an interesting question. So when your network turns out to be toxic and people take credit, someone in your network takes credit for your ideas, what are the bases for their brand, or how do you stand out with your branding? What do you do in those situations? Who would like to take this question? This is the toughie.
Communicating in the science world can be really challenging, and social media can help amplify perhaps a paper you just got published, or also get you slammed at the same time. So my golden rule is respond to what I call a troll, someone who's continually coming at you one time. Give them one response, a little empathy, a little understanding, or give them a response that you know that is science-based, but you don't have to keep feeding the trolls, because that's just amplifying their voice and their network, and it's not going to do you any good. It's finding that middle ground sometimes, but also knowing when to walk away, because you're just inflaming those moments. And when you're talking about other people taking credit, I would take a look at your tribe, your network, and understand how that happened, and if trying to resolve it is going to make a difference, or use that as a learning experience going forward. I think when, especially in the science world, the development of getting papers published is so interesting to me, and how it's submitted and the rounds of revisions, and then the day it's published. And I think there's a thought of, how do I post this, or how do I tell the world? And I think it's through that storytelling of how you got there, because everyone has gone through the submission and the revising process. And it's not necessarily that you received an award or that your paper was published, but it's about the journey and humanizing it. And I would recommend thinking about it from that side of the table. And if somebody's taking credit, perhaps comment even, this is a great moment for our team and success. I mean, you can still round it out, but also know if it's worth putting that post there, if it's a learnable moment.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, the one thing I will say that I meant to say earlier, I think the biggest thing with personal brand is to be, well, one, you guys have already said all this, but being very clear in who you are, but then being consistent across all the platforms. You know, has anyone ever experienced where you see a LinkedIn profile and their picture and what they put out there, and then in person, they're so different, right? I think if you are consistent across the way you interact with people, the way you communicate on social media, your email, in every single way, people start to really know who you are and what you're about. So even if someone else is taking credit for your work, at the end of the day, if your brand is strong enough across all platforms, all ways, people know what's really going on. You know, I think but you have to be consistent across all platforms and all ways of communicating. The stronger your personal brand is, the more likely people are going to really know who you are and know what you're all about. So those little moments aren't going to make as big of an impact.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. Anyone else? So I think the last question, there's two, they kind of go together, and it's for young professional women, two of the questions. And one is, how do you build your network and your brand, you know, just starting off, and also in this pandemic, looking for a job and getting into your career, how do you stay upbeat? So, anyone?
I'm happy to talk about it. I was feeling bad that I was dominated. You know, I talk a lot about building your social capital, this idea of your network. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? Especially when you're young. And as a secret introvert, when I first started my career, I found that so intimidating, right? Like I'm going to big networking. Well, you can't do that right now anyways, but going to big networking events, I'm the one hiding in the bathroom because I have no idea how to approach people, as unbelievable as that is. So the advice I give to young people is you need to be really clear about who you are. Are you an introvert? If you are, that doesn't mean you have to go to big old networking events. Have one-on-one coffees. You know, you need a network in the way that is best for you. And a lot of young people think, what do I have to contribute to a conversation? Here's the thing you guys are missing. Successful people love to share their story and they love to help young people. So, you know, you'd be surprised who you can get in front of and just say, you know, hi, I'm young in my career. I've heard amazing things about you and I would love to connect and hear your story. And a trick I would use in those coffees, because I was so nervous, and truth be told, Dena, I remember meeting you, my heart was pounding, you know, like it's very intimidating meeting amazing women. But what I would do to calm my heart down is I would get, you know, people talking, asking genuine questions about that person and truly interested to learn, and then following up and saying, you know, Maxine Clark, thank you so much for your time. Here's what I learned from you. And this is how it's changed my path. You know, people really love that because, you know, if I'm going to take the time to meet with somebody and talk to them and share my story and try to help them, then I want to know that I actually help them.
Yeah. And it's true. I'm the same way. I love asking people about their life and their career and listening and learning from them. So I think that's something we carry through no matter where we're at in our career or our networking. You know, it's always fun and for me, interesting to meet new people. So Chanté or Jackie, anyone else?
Yeah, I'll add. I do know folks who are either trying to pivot currently in their career or find a new job, and it is really tough. So if you're in a, which is not true for everyone, if you're in a financial position to maybe accept lower pay to get into that entry-level space, or if you can flex your schedule enough to do part-time of each so that you can maybe compensate for that pay reduction, you can do contractor or internship work to get that foot in the door for something that can pave the way for a more permanent position at the company. It's kind of hard to speak to a little bit of the unknown, but it is hard for a pandemic. I would say, you know, continue to network in some way, maybe ask friends to review your resume or CV. Sometimes after you've been staring at it for so long, you can't see, you know, possibly some of the mistakes.
Yeah, I can add just a little bit more. You mentioned CVs and resumes, which made me think new cover letter for every job. If you're brand new out of school, you're probably applying to a lot of jobs, and you should. That's what everybody does. Different cover letter for every job. Make sure it's tailored. It's super important. I will tell you, I think, you know, the times that I've been the hiring manager, I probably paid more attention to that cover letter and what is said in there or what is not said in there than I did to some of the details on the resume. Yeah. And also, you know, especially right out of school, you're going to get turned down, and that's okay. That does not reflect you and your abilities and your qualifications. I got turned down a lot when I was coming right out of grad school. So, and I think I'm doing okay. So that's okay. You will get there. So just keep telling yourself that. And one thing that really helped me when I was coming out of graduate school, and I didn't really know what I wanted that next step to be. I know we've talked a fair bit about like being authentic and knowing what you want and then going for it. What if you aren't there yet? And maybe there's some folks in the audience who aren't quite there yet of knowing what that next step is. I was one of them several years ago. And something I did was, instead of thinking about what I wanted, what job I wanted, what title I wanted, who I wanted to be. I instead took a step back and thought about what do I want my days to include? What activities do I enjoy doing every day? And what activities do I not enjoy doing and do I not want to do anymore? And then I didn't know what that job was, but I just started talking to anybody who would sit still long enough. And I would say, friends, colleagues, mentors, etc., and say, these are the things I want to do. And eventually somebody said, well, hey, have you ever thought about this career path? And it ended up being, the rest is history. But that was very helpful to me.
That's great. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I cannot thank you all enough for opening up and giving us your advice and your suggestions. Charli had to hop off the call to get ready for another presentation, busy women. But I also want to thank all the participants that joined us today, and especially the sponsors. I want to thank Ellie Hayes, who's our outreach director, who makes all this run so smoothly. Thank you, Ellie. And we hope to see you tomorrow for our final WISER Week event, and it will be on communication and negotiation skills. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dena.
Have a great day.
Thank you.